And then I will share. Aha, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, first thing. So I want to just a little background. Last spring, I was approached by the South Dakota Nurses Association to see if I would keynote their convention. And I said, sure. It was, it was in the spring. The convention's in October, so easy. And they said, oh, and would you do two presentations? I'm like, oh, sure. And then closer to time, I was like, why did I do that? Anyway, it turned out to be really fun. And then they wanted me to, the keynote, they wanted me to talk about AI and ANA. And I um I am not an AI expert, so I had to figure out, I was like, sure, I can do that. And then I had to figure out what my perspective was going to be. And it ended up my perspective was like, how do we preserve nursing with the technology? So that this is the presentation I gave them with a little bit of changes. But so anyway, that's why I did that. And I'm admitting at the same time. So here are the objectives, and you can see those. They made me do all that stuff. When you think about AI, what comes to your mind? Are you using it for anything, either at work or at home? Anyone? Just call out. Anyone using Chat GPT?
I use it.
We're using DAX Autopilot at HCMC.
Yes, I do.
Do you use Autopilot or Chat GPT at work or at home?
Both.
Both. And when you're at home, what do you use it for?
To help me write emails for the most part.
Uh-huh. Anyone else?
This is Julia. Yes, I do. I use it for both work and personal stuff. I'm taking a class now called Teaching with AI, and it's very
Oh,
interesting.
oh, I bet. So when the nurses in South Dakota, they said that they're using it for somebody's using it to find recipes. I said I find recipes the old-fashioned way, Google. Um, and some people were using it to write letters of reference for their students. And several talked about having AI help them organize their references, not find their references, but organize them and put them in APA style. And then somebody told me that sometimes that works well and sometimes it screws up. So
I was just going to say, I've been using AI a little bit with my job search.
mhm.
And I have also been using it a couple of times to create images. And when I have been, there's two things specifically that have come up. So I'm not using it in my work life. So in my personal life, I've been concerned about the environmental impact. So I've been trying to not use it as much and to be very thoughtful with how and why I use it. And then I have learned through how I have been using it that so for instance, I tried to look up an image of foster care and adoptees,
Mhm.
and it really crystallized for me about, and this was in Chat GPT, and just really recognizing that there's limitations. It's based on what's out there. And so I didn't want to perpetuate the images that it showed me. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Um, I've used it for ANA sent out a document that was, I can't even remember what it was about, but it was kind of, I think what the purpose of the document was kind of halfway through. And so quite frankly, I don't use Chat GPT, but my partner Barb does, and she likes to. So I'll say, "Oh, would you use Chat GPT for me?" And so I had her take that article and um, go. And she's actually named her Chat GPT. His name is Artie, and she asked Artie to do three separate things. And the first one was to summarize the paper. And the second one was to identify actionable items. And the third one was to turn it into an advocacy letter. And it was pretty amazing because it didn't change any of the words, but it changed where the words were. So it made total sense. And I'm like, oh, I wish A&A would just start using ChatGPT. Not for creating content, but organizing it in a way that was far more accessible than others. So anyway, so we're all kind of getting used to some aspects of it. St. Francis Health Services is, Cammie's not on the call. I would have her talk about it, but Cammie Peterson DeVries is the vice president for whatever at, sorry, at St. Francis Health Services. And she's getting grants to use AI in different ways. And one thing is that they got a robot, and this robot does birthday greetings, leads bingo games, does different things, and the residents and staff seem to be really happy with how this robot is changing their lives. And now she's working on a grant to have when you work the night shift in long-term care, you're the only licensed person there. And so she's trying to figure out how AI could actually help be the second person. Like if you were working with another person, you'd say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And having AI be that second person. So she's working through that. So I'm always interested in what she's doing. And then at the University of Minnesota, they're using VR stimulation, virtual reality with their BSN students to help them learn how to take care of more than one patient at a time. So they're gradually increasing up to 5 patients using VR. And the students are saying that they feel far more prepared by using virtual reality to do this than trying to add patients in a clinical setting. So here are some of the example of AI tools that are currently in use. I thought this was interesting just because sometimes I'll know the name of something and I won't even think of it as being AI, so you can just see that there are a number of things that we're using now. So it's pretty exciting, but like what should we be worrying about, and should we be worrying? The question of AI comes up for future topics. Somebody else always mentions AI. There's articles all the time about AI, and it's going to replace nurses, or what's going on. So what should we be thinking about this? And one of a book that I read a long time ago that I will never get rid of, I can tell you exactly where it is in my bookshelf, is this Devices and Desires, Gender Technology in the American American Nursing. And one of the things the author, Sandalowski, says is that that technology has really made improvements in care many times, but it's never made care easier or faster, and she goes back to even talking about, once we had the thermometer, that you could accurately tell what someone's temperature was, but you had to do something with that. So she says that technology is neither inherently good or bad. Its impact depends on its timely, effective, and humane application. So this is a really good book, it's one worth having. So after looking at Sandalowski's work, then I thought, well, what better than to go to the nursing's foundational documents, the Code of Ethics and Scope and Standards, to see what they say about AI. Scope and Standards talks about, the definition of nursing. So what is nursing? Before we talk about AI, let's talk about nursing. It integrates the art and science, and it protects and promotes and optimizes health and human functioning, prevents illness and injury, facilitates healing, and alleviates suffering through compassionate presence. I like that, compassionate presence. And then it goes on to say, that those things that we've heard for a long, long time, the diagnosis and treatment of human responses, and advocacy in the care of individuals, families, groups, communities, and populations, in recognition of the connection of all of humanity. The Code of Ethic adds to the definition of nursing our persisting commitment to both the welfare of the sick, injured, and vulnerable in society, and to social justice. Those are powerful words. Nursing's commitment to the right to health. And nursing acts to change those aspects of social structures that detract from health and well-being. AI is in the scope and standards of practice. It's in assessment, in bias, in decision-making, and ethics and ethical concerns. In assessment, it says the nurse remains knowledgeable about constantly changing technologies that impact the assessment process. For example, telehealth and artificial intelligence. In bias, assuming that AI will be used as a mechanism to support decision-making, that nurses will need to fully embrace the ramifications of how care delivery might be changed in the future, and what bias exists within the algorithms and big data sets used in AI. And that nurses at all levels of nursing will need to promptly learn about AI, both in benefits as well as responsibilities. And nurses will need to engage with their organizations to define the possibilities. There's a lot of burden on nurses in figuring out how to use AI in the scope and standards. In ethics, technological advances in genetics, genomics, and artificial intelligence may challenge nurses' ability to keep pace with associated ethical concerns. In the Code of Ethics for nurses, one of the things I really love about the Code of Ethics is there's such a nice glossary of all the terms that are used in the document. And they do include a definition of artificial intelligence. Thank you, Martha Turner. A broad category that involves using algorithms to drive the behavior of agents such as software programs, games, machines, robotics, and other hardware devices. It encompasses a wide range of existing, emerging, and future technologies intended to assist nurses in caring for their patients. Provision 3.2 talks about advocating for persons who receive care. And it says, as technology increasingly influences healthcare, nurses establish and maintain trust by balancing clinical and ethical judgment with the use of augmented intelligence, or AI, in nursing practice. And nurses lend their expertise and influence in integration of augmented intelligence and AI in clinical encounters. Again, the burden is on the nurse to make sure that we're using AI appropriately. Provision 4.2 addresses barriers to exercising nursing practice authority, that it can be affected by technological advances such as the implementation and use of augmented intelligence, or AI, especially when integrated without careful consideration of potential harmful consequences. And to maintain nursing practice authority, nurses address barriers surrounding rapid and evolving technologies, lack of experience, exposure, and knowledge, poor representation by those in leadership roles, and unsupportive work environments. And then provision 7.5, considerations related to ethics, technology, and policy. that nurses contribute to decisions involving the development and adoption of technologies in the provision of nursing care, that nurses consider the ways in which technologies are developed and their impact on knowledge production and nursing practice, and that developing and adopting cutting-edge technologies may stratify care in ways that exclude those who are unable to afford potential options. Conscientious use of informatics and healthcare technologies requires consideration of health equity principles and an emphasis on transparency in development tactics and application processes. So what they're saying is that nurses are involved. They're not saying just nurses who really understand AI, but I would say that they're saying all nurses in all roles in all settings. I'll give you an example. This isn't an AI, this was the electronic health record. But when I was at Abbott, when I worked at Abbott, I was on the Informatics Council. And when the electronic health record came to Abbott, somebody, a nurse, had the idea that it would be really good to have a committee with a nurse from each unit on the committee so that we could evaluate the EHR and make appropriate changes. And she wrote a charter for the committee that was really the best charter I'd ever worked with, because it said that any of the changes to the EHR that affected nurses would have to come to our committee and get approval before implementation. That's a powerful committee. So here's my example. It was an Allina-wide infectious disease group that came to our committee. We were the last committee that they had to get sign off on because they had it all ready to go. It was in the playground, ready to be turned on, and they were gonna add to the nursing admission flow sheet just one row, but it said that the nurse would evaluate chest X-rays on when they were admitting patients to look for evidence of TB. Apparently, they had tried to get the physicians to do that, and they couldn't. And so, when you can't get the docs to do something, you ask the nurses to do it. So anyway, they said, we're ready to go live with this. And I said, wow, that's currently not in our scope of practice. And I said, it could be, but you'd have to teach us. And, I think there were, like 2,000 nurses at Abbott you'd have to teach. And, even if I don't know what the average salary is, but if you would do ballpark like $45 an hour, and I don't know how many hours it would take, let's just say 8 hours of education to teach us how to do that. And then it's going to Allina-wide, so you'd have to teach all the nurses in all the hospitals how to do that. And I don't know how many that is. And they went back, and that never became a deal not because I understood how the software works, but I understood nursing. And I also had a colleague who had taught me how to, every time you can attach a dollar amount to something that you don't want to have done, then your chances of getting by without having it done improve. So I'm a huge proponent of nurses who understand nursing to be involved in as much as they can in issues around technology and change, because they need us to be able to speak up. So the Online Journal of Nursing has recently had a series on artificial intelligence and in nursing and healthcare. And you can see here some of the titles. It's something everyone's talking about. I was just at that meeting in Newport, and there was a session on AI, and I suggested that in the future, not having a section on AI, but including AI in every other topic. So, with all the information and all the ideas and all this stuff, where should we start to really think about how we should feel about AI and what we should do? And so I decided to ask ChatGPT what to do and to do a SWOT analysis. I couldn't believe I was like doing strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats yet again. But I thought, I wonder if I asked Barb if she would ask her friend Artie, her ChatGPT, to do a SWOT on ChatGPT. So here's what Artie told us. Artie's first comment was, artificial intelligence will never replace the human heart, but it can help heal it smarter. Okay. Here were the strengths identified by Artie. An enhanced clinical decision support can, AI systems can analyze vast data sets, and reduced administrative burden. Natural language processing and documentation tools can automate charting, freeing nurses to focus more on patient care. I actually see that one as both a strength and a weakness. We'll see how that turns out. Improve staffing and workflow efficiency with predictive and analytics. Education and simulation with AI-driven virtual patients and adaptive learning systems, which we've seen like they're doing at the U. And error reduction and safety medication management, barcode scanning, and anomaly detection systems. So those are the strengths. Here are the weaknesses. The data quality and bias. AI depends on high quality, diverse data. If training data underrepresents certain populations or conditions, recommendations may be unsafe or inequitable. Workflow integration challenges. AI tools often don't fit seamlessly into existing EHRs or nursing routines, causing frustration or alert fatigue. Limited understanding and trust, with nurses' uncertainty about how AI arrives at recommendations. If you don't know what goes in at the front of the algorithm, then you don't know if you can trust what comes out at the other end. I met with a business opinion writer for the Star Tribune a while back, and we were talking about all the different software programs to develop the perfect staffing model. And I told him nurses don't know what goes into the algorithm at the front end. And we just know what answers are spit out at the end. And he said, wow, that's like making chocolate chip cookies without a recipe. We need to understand what goes into the algorithm to see what comes out. I guess some places are better about sharing that than others, and I heard that anecdotally from some people that Epic is really bad about sharing, which is too bad because we all have Epic. Cost and access inequities. Smaller hospitals or long-term care facilities may lack their resources, and ethical and legal ambiguity. Accountability for errors involving AI remains unclear. And having just come from the NSO meeting, it looks like the nurse is really going to bear the burden more than the vendor or the institution. Threats. These are the things that we talk about a lot. The job displacement fears that AI will replace nurses, privacy and cyber security risks, the heightened exposure to breaches of protected health information, and we see that happening, algorithmic bias and inequity, over-reliance on automation and excessive trust that could dull clinical judgment or delay hands-on assessments, and regulatory and liability uncertainty, and including around licensure protection for nursing practice. when I was at the NCSBN annual meeting in the summer, they talked a bit about how AI, but never from the perspective of the nurse and licensure protection, just how boards of nursing might be able to use it. So I don't know what kind of conversations they're having about licensure protection. And opportunities, augmented, not replaced practice. AI can elevate nursing practice by handling routine cognitive and documentation tasks. The question I have there is who decides what's routine? And Becker's hospital uh, thing, whatever it's called, that's the email that comes out about different things was saying that AI is great because it can take away those mundane tasks like admission and discharge, that they're just clerical. And I would argue that admission and discharge are really kind of the most important, that it's like where you do assessments and education and planning and evaluation, and that so who decides uh, what's routine and what's not routine, and what requires the brains of a nurse rather than the brains of AI. Opportunities with population health and predictive care, and research and evidence generation, personalized care and patient engagement, and policy and leadership roles for nurses. As AI governance becomes essential, nurses have an opportunity to shape ethical standards, training, and practice guidelines. And we really need nurses to be there, and not turf it off to another nurse, but all nurses. ChatGPT's closing thoughts were, AI in nursing has immense promise to amplify compassion with computation, but it requires nurses' active participation in design, policy, and oversight to ensure safety, equity, and human-centered care. How do you think ChatGPT did? You think you did pretty well on the SWOT analysis? I thought it kind of did fine. And I didn't give it any information except to ask for a SWOT analysis on nurses using AI. So, okay. So the ANA put out a document in 2022, the ethical use of artificial intelligence in nursing practice. And you can read this. Nurses must ensure that advanced technologies do not compromise, I lost that word, compromise the nature of human interactions and relationships central to the nursing profession. And that it's crucial that nurses anticipate and evaluate the impact of AI on healthcare through a proactive approach that emphasizes agency, caring, and influence over how technology is developed and applied. And nurses must be informed about AI so they can provide appropriate education to patients and families to dispel myths and alleviate fears, and thereby support the use of AI for optimal health outcomes. Again, nurses are taking an active, proactive position, not just reacting to what AI is. Nursing Outlook, the Academy Journal, had an article about AI in the September-October issue this year, and the ethical exploration of benefits, risks, and educational shifts. And they said, despite these innovative technological advancements, nurses must retain their uniqueness and hold on to the values of compassion and empathy that define nursing. Generative AI is here to stay. Nurses must choose to retain the integrity by valuing all that nurses bring to their patients, institutions, and the profession. And in the blog Nursology in September, they said, technology is a tool, not a replacement, that AI is not the enemy of nursing, it is a tool. But tools must be wielded with wisdom. Jean Watson's theory reminds us that caring is not a task, it is a way of being. As we navigate the digital frontier, let us remain rooted in compassion, presence, and ethical reflection. The future of nursing is not just high tech, it must also be high touch. And oh, I wrote that really tiny at the bottom. And as we address the possibilities of AI as nurses, we need to be able to articulate first and foremost what nursing is. And Roy Simpson, who's at Emory, and he's done work on electronic health records since they began and has always been a great thought leader. He recently put in the ANA a chat about innovation, that while emotional intelligence in nursing matters, it cannot substitute for the ability to articulate what nursing is, how it differs from medicine, and why nursing practice standards, no budget considerations, must drive decisions about staffing, care delivery models, and practice environments. So while we say, you know, the nursing is about caring, and you know, so we don't always do a good job of being able to talk about, well, what does that really mean? It's more than that. We're just nice people who care about people. But you know, we have the science of nursing, and I describe nursing as the science of nursing and the art of improv. But we have to be able to really be at the table and talk about the issues around AI. We have to lead from practice knowledge, and we need to be able to articulate nursing's unique value proposition as distinct from medicine. And we need to resist institutional pressures that prioritize compliance over professional practice. So that's what Roy said. And these are my references, and I will stop sharing and we can chat. So what do you think?
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah. The code really did try to jump into this. And it seems like if we don't rewrite the code every 10 years, we're going to be way behind the power curve because AI is changing practice so fast and changing what nurses have access to and what patients have access to. And I think how care will be delivered. So much in the news these days about people using AI instead of psychological counseling and being unable to get appointments from their docs. So they're going on using AI to get information about their differential disease diagnoses and getting inadequate teaching, like discharge planning, discharge teaching, home health care stuff. And so they're going online. So AI is in fact providing a lot of nursing information, and nurses, I think, need to be quite on top of the situation, recognizing that patients and their families are doing this and not pretending that they're not, but saying, what are you learning when you look this up? And how does that match up with what we're trying to get you to do? Or how does this, you know, doing, I love your impromptu. I got to remember that forever and ever. The art of impromptu is nursing. But
yeah.
I it just, every day I learn more about it and every day I'm knocked out again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's the thing in healthcare where we're always chasing the bright and shiny object, and it's certainly that now too. So which things are really helpful and then which things aren't? Because not everything will be. Julia.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great presentation, Kat. This is like I stated earlier. AI has come to stay. I share that I'm taking this class designed by the Minsky system, teaching with AI. At the beginning, I was so scared and worried. I didn't know what they were talking about. But when I started to develop interest and, being interested and looking into it and using it, I'm like the instructor said, we can't tell students not to use AI because it's a tool that has come to stay. When they leave us as graduates, they're going into the workforce to be, our colleagues, to be nurses practicing with every other discipline in the healthcare system. So that we should tell them, yes, you can use it, but you need to use it ethically. This is how to use it so that they'll be well informed, from us, from the school, prior to becoming, nurses working in the healthcare system or workforce. So I like exactly how you weave in the code of ethics, the Jane Watson theory. These are things we're supposed to be using anyway, every day, as nurses. The code of ethics is in everything we do as a nurse, if we're doing it right. So I'm so grateful to be, listening to you this evening. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. It was interesting listening to NSO and what the risk is to the nurse in some of these things. And it just makes me I always come up with more questions like the ambient documentation where like I know that Mayo's using it some and is that going to help nurses or is it not going to help? Is that because one of the things you're supposed to like if you have a really busy shift, like they had an example of a case study where um, they were short a nurse or two in ICU. And so trying to do the best with what they had, and then somebody had a bad outcome. And so if the ambient charting, you're supposed to be able to edit it. You read it after and make sure it's accurate. But if you're really, really busy and you're too busy to do anything, and then you just like let that go, is that going to end up helping you or hurting you? And how does it, will patients, how does that affect the nurse-patient relationship if, patients tell nurses everything, but will they if it's all being heard from somewhere else? And then somebody brought up at that meeting, well, in some states, if you don't, you have to get informed consent because otherwise it's against the law to record someone without their permission. So, there's like the legal things and the ethical things and the just how do you make this work and how do you make it work well so that it's helping and not just adding another layer of complexity. Martha.
Can you say more about ambient charting and what it is and how it can be used or?
Has anyone used it on the call? So my understanding is that it's just that the conversation is being heard by AI and turn it be like a scribe. Oh, Colleen, can you talk
Yeah.
about? Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm not gonna turn my camera on, but yeah, I use DAX Autopilot at work, and so you have to Like you use your Epic in your phone and you load the visit that way, and then you start by saying, your subjective, Mary is here for whatever, whatever. And then when you go in the room, you ask permission for the patient, and then
Okay.
you turn it on. And it's just like you said, Kathy, it records everything. So you have to really go back and for those of us who are really wordy care providers, makes really long, long notes. And so I haven't mastered it yet, and I've really only used it, just tried to start using it recently. But I think that I work with a bunch of people who use it all the time. And so if you get used to being short and sweet, it could really help.
I heard a presentation about it from someone from Mayo a year or so ago, and after the presentation, I went up and I asked her if you could use it to tell if a nurse was impaired, and her response was, "We're not doing that now," which means that you could, which again, like, is that a decision based on, I had a cold today, or I have English as a second language, or, I'm truly impaired. And I mean, it's just interesting. How about Celeste and um
I was just gonna say, hey, Colleen. I just saw Colleen at she was
Hello.
helping us out, I just think this week. So I just wanted to piggyback on something that you said kind of towards the end about getting kind of succinct in your conversations so that the documentation is better. And honestly, I like wordy providers. I like providers that talk to me and tell me a little bit more, and like you sound like you do. It never occurred to me until you just said that perhaps people would actually alter their conversation because of this ambient documentation, which is kind of concerning to me. I don't know what other people think about that.
One of the things they teach us when we're learning how to use it too is that it's not that helpful for people who use a lot of like dot phrases and smart sets and from Epic in their documentation. And I have gotten so much of that written out in my own words so that I have ability to type things faster, right? My spiel's kind of the same as most of us are. And I think that's another reason why I struggle with it, because they're not built into the DAX autopilot, and then I have to add them back, and it doesn't seem to save me any time.
Right. But can you envision a time when you might actually alter your conversation so the documentation is maybe more clear or succinct?
No, I just go back and delete.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
to make it, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the way I speak and the way I type aren't quite the same. So when I might talk to a patient and then document after, and then in the notes, Docs Autopilot's really helpful in interpreter visits, which are about 80% of my visits some days. And so in that case, it does really help, but you do have to kind of go back and shorten everything. I wouldn't change the way I speak because I don't know how to do it any other way, but maybe somebody who's learning how to use that system and doesn't have a long history of providing care might.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for giving me something to think about.
how long does the checking your documentation take to make the corrections?
Well, because like you were saying earlier, it's a really busy day, so I don't tend to do it until I'm all done. And so probably, I don't know how much longer it takes me to do that than I do just looking over and reading my notes anyway, but probably just a minute more for each note
All
and
right.
deleting, some of what it was there and making it sound more like myself in a note versus general conversation.
I'd have to stop telling jokes.
That's right. Right.
I've been seeing a knee surgeon for the last year or so, and every time he comes in, he uses it on like an iPad type thing or some type of device like that. And I mentioned the surgeon part of it because he'll say things like the measurements and different things. So he doesn't have to like write that down. He can continue doing his thing while he's just like talking to it himself. So I think that that can be helpful for very like, procedures and things like that. That might be helpful.
Do you feel left out of the conversation, like he's talking to his iPad rather than talking to you?
I did, except I saw him a couple times before that, and that's kind of how he speaks anyway. So, I mean, give it a grain
Yeah,
of salt. It's a surgeon, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Martha,
ortho, yeah.
yeah, they do their best.
Does the AI edit out a side conversation, or if we're talking and I tell the patient, you should be well enough to sit up and watch the Vikings game tonight, and the patient responds with, yeah, my nephew played for the Vikings 3 years ago. Will all that stuff appear in the note, or does AI edit it down to only the parameters of a medically or a healthcare related note? Will it add all the chit chat in?
It adds all the banter back and forth we have with patients, right? So like in the few times that I've used it, everything that we've talked about has been written down, but it does summarize it at the end, right? Like, so it goes through the information and then it writes these big kind of notes. And then in the summary part, it makes it kind of shorter. And again, I really have had it now for like 4 months and used it 4 times, I think. So I'm not an expert in it, but it was really wordy but with the summary, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Sure.
it wouldn't be good if, like I used to tell my patients when the Vikings were playing, to put their call light on if there was a good play. Julia.
Yes, I like what Colin said about going back to her notes and making it hers. It's like using AI to, I don't know if anybody has used it to write your meeting notes, minutes. It's so crazy. You use it and you don't edit it. You just send it to members the way it is. When people read it, they'll be like, what kind of meeting is this? Because it picks up every single thing that comes out in that meeting. So the best thing you can do for yourself is, if you're the secretary using it, at the end when they send you, share the information, you go back to it and make it yours. Like, I took these minutes, I did the documentation, before you share it to your team. But sometimes people don't have time to go back to read it. They just share it the way it is, and you read it, you're like, what is this? What are they talking about? So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks. Casey, would you like to talk about your meeting notes?
Sure. I use an AI app called Fellow. We actually all do it on my team at my job. It records all of your meeting notes. It gives you a recap. It also sends me action items so I can do like follow-up tasks and check them off like a checklist, because I have to do that too. And then it will send an automatic email to all the attendees with the recap. I have the option to like edit it first, so that's kind of nice, because sometimes it misspells names or will do something weird, but for the most part, I don't know, I like it. And it works with Zoom, Google Teams, WebEx, because we use all those platforms with our customers, so it's very handy.
So it's kind of like having an administrative assistant.
Pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
without having to pay
Whenever
them.
you want them.
Yeah, yeah, I like it.
Have
Mhm.
you all seen it yet? Where I attend a meeting where there's a person that has, speaking of that, um, uh, administrative assistant idea, there's a person who never attends but has their note taker there, and then that's what I guess they're getting the notes taken, and it's through the platform we're using is Zoom, and so I don't know how she set that up, but I'm assuming that that's some type of AI app or something like that, and then she gets the notes that way. So I don't know. You guys may start to see that as we're using more meetings, that individuals are deciding to do that. for
Fellow could
themselves.
do that too. Like if I'm an attendee at the meeting, but I can't attend, fellow will join the meeting for me and
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's something similar. Yep.
Mhm.
So how about acronyms in nursing? Jan Navarro, do you want to talk about that? You're on mute.
When we discuss things, I mean, I may not say chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, I'll say COPD or those kinds of things. How does somebody that doesn't have medical knowledge, an ambient kind of thing, is there some type of training where they can get some of those kinds of things? I'm just curious because nursing is known for all of medicine is known for all of the acronyms that we use and sometimes we can carry on whole conversations and never actually say full words.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. We use, fetal heart tones, like in documentation,
Yeah.
I would just put FHT, but when you use DAX Autopilot, it actually does say fetal heart tones. So
Okay.
it doesn't, I mean, again, I'm not typing it in, but it doesn't, you know what I mean? So I think it's kind of like Dragon where it has enough training that if I said COPD, it would probably put in, chronic obstructive.
COPD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was
That's,
just going to say that, Colleen, just like Dragon,
yeah.
there's different products for different industries. And so they're trained, they call it, I mean, there was also a process of train your dragon so it knew your voice and things like that. But they're then familiar with the acronyms and sort of the language of whatever the industry is.
So Teddy Potter recently was noting that an article she wrote was cited in somebody else's work. And then so she looked at the citation and she actually hadn't written the article. It was a hallucination. So, I think, and I've noticed that ChatGPT really likes to please. And so, you have to, there's just little cautions that we still have to make. And then the issue around bias is scary. So I have to tell you, at the meeting I was at, I met somebody who the leader of this work team has a robotic dog. And during the meetings, which are all held on Zoom, every once in a while the robotic dog barks. And they said it's really annoying. And I asked if they had paid attention to when the dog barks. Is it if somebody is saying something she's finding annoying or if it seems random? And the person hadn't been paying attention to that, but she's going to be paying attention now to when the robotic dog barks during Zoom meetings. And my dog, who's back on the recliner, just turned over and went back to sleep, so he's doing fine.
Kathi, thank you. This was a great presentation. I've been bringing up AI for a couple of years now, so I'm really glad we're talking about it. And I'm glad that the nursing community and some of the literature is getting some stuff out there. I think, going back to when you were talking about like admission and discharge and that's more than just a technical task. I think that's one of the reasons I think nurses needed to be really involved actively in all the dialogue that goes on around this. But I think in the course of that, we need to not only pay attention to what's important as part of our nursing role, but we also need to be alert to not saving the sacred cows that we don't want to give up. I think of all my years in nursing, and every time there was something new that came up, we had this look of horror, like how could anyone but a nurse do X, Y, Z? And so I think it'll require some real careful critical thinking to determine how this can be helpful and not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why we need to really pay attention to the definitions of nursing. And Not that, well, I always give a back rub to this person at this time or whatever, I gave up that a long time ago, but really focusing on, what is nursing and what would we be missing if it didn't exist? And then what would we do if there was a power outage? My book group just recently read a book by James Patterson and Bill Clinton where technology was just came like this close to being destroyed altogether. And they were like, we're going back to the dark ages, because there would be no banking, no government, no this, and through the whole thing. And I know even when the EHR goes down for a bit, how challenging it is now for people to do paper and pencil and actually write notes. So how do we have redundant systems so that we're not so reliant on something that, could be easily disrupted? And the other thing, I guess my big thing is that in the last few years, it seems like we've gotten really into somebody's an expert, so we're going to defer to the expert. And, we need every voice in the room. And, there's the people who totally understand how all of this works. And then there's the people who really understand how nursing works and bringing them together so that we can create the best that we can actually have. Any other comments? I was gonna ask, let's see if she said, Kristen, are you using AI in school?
We have strict policies against using AI in school.
Ah,
So we've signed a disclosure or a waiver at the beginning of the year. I don't know what to call it. Just saying we promise not to use AI during the coursework, and that all of our content that we produce is our own. And so we can, how to describe it, the closest thing that we could do is use it to guide our research, but our research is all done through the library. But just of like, so sometimes people will throw in like a question to AI about a specific topic that we're looking at, but then we take the ideas from there and then go to the research.
sure.
So, but I know that I have other friends in school that are not in nursing that use AI extensively in their work in school.
It's a great organizing
Mhm.
assistant.
Yeah.
Annette, what are you telling your students?
Yes, a variety of things, and it kind of depends on the level of the student too. I believe in the beginning students and foundational things that sometimes they skip getting some of the basics still, and they need to maybe do. Not use AI to help them as much. But then once they get some of the basics, then it may be used to help them synthesize information. We're looking at it all kinds of ways. We're saying for some assignments, absolutely not. You cannot use AI. And then we have some assignments further in the curriculum where we say use AI to develop an advocacy letter. That's what we had in one of the courses. And I said, I like to use it as oftentimes like a starting point just to give me some ideas about things, like bookends, either a starting point or at the end when I'm editing that abstract and it's at 504 words and 500 is the limit or something, things like that. So, but yeah, we're exploring we're talking about AI all the time, and how we can best use it with students, but also, I mean, what's the impact going to be? Think about NCLEX constantly, but what is the impact going to be if students are using AI for a lot of these assignments? They're not learning the problem solving and critical thinking that we need. So just to end on a worrisome note, sorry, but there's a lot of implications.
There are, I think that the more that we're just mushing around and thinking about it and trying different, like I think that's all good, because then it allows us to be creative and innovative and yeah. So Rachel said that she's at Mankato, and she says that she's going to make students do a search comparison starting in the spring, do a database search first, and then put the same terms in AI and see what themes are similar and different, and then evaluating if the evidence AI generates is real. So actually testing AI's abilities. So that's cool.
When I use AI at home, I put parameters on when I'm asking it to do something. And you can specifically say, you know, don't create any statistics, provide evidence, or like provide websites or proof or citations to support what you're giving me. And you can kind of teach your own personal AI what you value instead of, because I'll say things like, don't just support what I'm saying, you know, I want actual information, research it. And then there's different categories where you can do like a quick response, and you can all the way down to like a deeper research mode.
Yeah, while I say ChatGPT did a good job at doing my SWOT analysis without a lot of parameters, it has done other nursing document synthesis and things for me in the past. So it kind of knows a bit of what I think about nursing. So, it wasn't completely a naive discussion. So this is great. I think it's just a topic we just need to keep talking about and thinking about, and then remembering to go back to our foundational documents, going to the Code of Ethics and going to Scope and Standards, which there'll be a new one out in the 2026, and keeping track of what they say, those documents say too, because it should inform our practice, and it also informs how we'll be treated if there is an error that goes to the board or goes to litigation. Like, they'll go back to those foundational documents as well as thinking about AI. So using AI isn't going to be your excuse for practice anytime soon. So any closing thoughts?
Thanks for this
Kathi.
wonderful presentation.
thank
Yeah,
you.
good idea,
Yeah,
especially
thank
for us
you.
older people who don't have to use AI.
Oh,
All
but
of
you might
us.
have fun.
All of us.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Kathi.
evening,
Nice
everyone.
presentation.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Thank you.